Recording.
Welcome everybody to the Raising Trees webinar series. It is wonderful to be back here near the beginning of summer, although I will tell you on the Alabama's Gulf Coast, summer has been going on for about a month, but I know for different parts of the country and different parts of the world, it's very different. So welcome. We have a wonderful webinar for you today with a fantastic speaker, and it's my understanding that it's actually one of the first presentations as it relates to the new SFI standards coming out in urban forestry. So we're very excited to be hosting Paul Johnson today and his presentations on the standards for urban forest and a roadmap for sustainability. So thank you, Paul, very much for joining us on the webinar series today. With me today, as is our norm, is Mr. Jack Rowe, who is my co-moderator, my partner in crime, who helps keep things in order on this webinar series and keeps things running smoothly. Real quick, I'm just going to go through a few housekeeping items before I formally introduce today's speaker and get this presentation started. So as many of you know on our webinar series, and I know many of you are probably experts today in Zoom, but we have two different ways for you to communicate. We have the chat function, which is a great way for y'all to communicate amongst yourselves, provide any comments, share any information. It's also a place where my colleague Jack Rowe will be posting some pertinent information, such as future webinars and how to access the payment codes for anybody needing CEUs today. If you have questions for Paul Johnson, please put those in the Q&A box. It's much easier for us to be able to kind of keep up with that information there. CEUs, I know many of you are hoping to have CEUs for today's webinar, and yes, we are approved for ISA CEUs. As is our norm, we do have a payment portal for CEUs. This is a bit of a confusing system. I get emails about it every week. I've been trying to find a better way to do it, but it's a dual registration process. The webinars are free, and we like to keep them that way. There's many of you that are joining simply because you want to understand the information that's out there, and as a result, you register directly through the Zoom links that we provide every week, and you can access this webinar at no cost. However, at any point, should you want CEUs, we do have a separate payment portal, which I see Jack just put in our chat box, where you can register and pay for that CEU. It's a $10 fee to access an ISA CEU. Please note, you do need to stay on for the entirety of today's webinar to qualify for CEUs. So please do so and don't make me make hard decisions there. This webinar is being recorded and is our norm. I know it's a bit awkward, but they are hosted on our Alabama Community Forestry Facebook page. Jack is putting the link in the chat box. Follow us, like us. You'll be able to go watch this webinar, share it with other people. I also think Paul Johnson is going to be putting a link of this up on one of his web pages, and he might clue us in as to where that is in a few minutes as well. So without further ado, let me stop my screen share and introduce today's speaker. So with us today, we have Paul Johnson, who is the Senior Director of Urban and Community Forestry for the Sustainable Forestry Initiative. Paul is an International Society of Arboriculture board-certified master arborist, a municipal specialist, and tree risk assessment, tree oak wilt, and wild risk reduction qualified. He is also a Society of American Foresters certified forester. He is a past president of the ISA Board of Directors, and he graduated from Oklahoma State University with a degree in forestry. He has been a state UNCF program leader, radio talk show host, newspaper columnist, extension horticulturalist, university adjunct instructor, and a plant healthcare specialist. Paul believes that trees are key to a healthier, safer communities. Paul, thank you very much for joining us on Raising Trees, and I will turn the virtual floor over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bo. Thank you, Jack. I'd like to start off with a land acknowledgement. The Sustainable Forestry Initiative's diverse team of staff and consultants live and work on the ancestral territories of many Indigenous nations, including from our offices on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin people in what is now Ottawa, Ontario, and the Nashkatonk and Piscataway people in present-day Washington, D.C. We are committed to building forest-focused collaborations that recognize and respect Indigenous peoples' rights, traditional knowledge, relationships with the land, and enduring leadership in forest stewardship, and responsibilities to future generations. I am so excited to be here with you today. As Bo pointed out, this is the first time I've gotten to really talk about the standard since our board approved it last month. So I'm going to let the cat out of the bag here right at the beginning. The standard has been finalized and approved, and this summer we're starting to share that with everyone, and this is one of those first opportunities. So I really appreciate you joining us. I see a lot of friends in the list of attendees, so it's really great to see all of you here. For those of you that don't know a lot about SFI, I didn't, being in urban and community forestry for the last couple of decades. SFI has been very, very involved in more traditional forest management and certifications for over 25 years. But when this opportunity came up, I did some real research, and it was just too unique an opportunity to turn down. And at SFI, our vision really is a world that values and benefits from sustainably managed forests, no matter where those forests are. And our mission is to advance sustainability through forest-focused collaborations. And this project is a great example of that collaboration. Our SFI board is a little bit different than some of the other boards that you may be familiar with. It is made up of the CEOs of a lot of different organizations, roughly divided into these three categories. You may see some familiar names on that list: Arbor Day Foundation, American Forest, SAF, Clemson, Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. So there's a lot of people that have a role in urban forestry that have been a part of SFI for quite some time. SFI is not just standards, though. We have 4 pillars that we focus on. I'm currently in the standards pillar because that's been the primary focus of the last couple of years. But we also have a conservation pillar, which is really about applying science to determine what the impacts are of all of those lands that are under sustainable forest management and the other ways that we help kind of advance sustainability. We also have an education pillar. You may be familiar with Project Learning Tree. It joined SFI a little over 5 years ago, and the number of learning opportunities and what we call a lifetime of learning really has grown under this kind of partnership, collaboration between PLT and SFI. And then we also have a community pillar, which is really focused on supporting both the SFI community and network and working with the governments and other organizations all across North America and the world. One of the reasons why I made the change, I was with Texas A&M Forest Service for 17 years, had a job that I absolutely loved, but when this opportunity came up, it was unique because as many of these the schemes and potential ways that we've had to kind of address, evaluate, audit urban and community forestry over the last couple of decades, whether you go back to Matheny and Clark, if you look at the U.S. Forest Service audit program that they put together, we've never had a standard for urban and community forestry. And you only get one chance to be first. And this was that chance. Well, not only is there now a standard, but all of the SFI standards are audited by third-party accredited certification bodies. So you see an example of some of these on the screen. But what that means is that SFI is in charge of kind of the process of creating a sector-developed standard. But we don't go out and then say, yes, you as an organization have met the standard or not. These third parties actually do that audit, and they're the ones that grant the certification if you've met all of the required indicators. And that that does something for us that we've never had before, which is really a great way to prove that we're doing the right things, that we are having the right impacts in our communities by taking care of our urban forests. So we'll go through a few more details about that, but this was part of that unique opportunity that just drew me to SFI, and I'm really glad to have been a part of this process. If you don't know too much about SFI, you may have at least seen the logo when you buy wet wipes or when you turn over your coffee cup at a conference. We have a really wide network and we have a good recognition with the general public. So you can see here, a great number of our Fortune 100 companies use the SFI label. A large proportion of millennials are aware and that it has a positive influence when they're making decisions. So not only are your napkins going to be able to have an SFI label on them, but we are also going to be able to promote your urban forest, your community forest, with something that already has good penetration and good standing with the public. And so I think that that's a really great way for us to collaborate and extend the SFI network and have an even bigger impact on making sure that we all have access to trees, green spaces, and all the amazing benefits that come from them. So very happy to say we have developed the first SFI Urban and Community Forest Sustainability Standard. And we've done that in collaboration with the other known entities in our sector. American Forest, Arbor Day Foundation, ISA, SMA, and Tree Canada are named partners in this effort. They serve on a steering committee. They had representatives on the task group that did the development itself, along with some other organizations that you'll see in a moment. But it was really important for SFI and for me to make sure that SFI is respectfully entering urban and community forestry as a sector and building the capacity of the sector and increasing the resources and our ability to affect change without competing against all of the other great organizations that have been working in this sector for such a long time. And as a member and a proponent for all of these organizations, it's been a pleasure to work with them through this process. One in particular I know people always ask about is, well, but what about Tree City USA? And that's one of the reasons why Arbor Day Foundation was so important as a collaborator on this, is that we see them as complementary programs. Tree City USA is a great entryway for a city to be able to show that they're paying attention to their urban forest. But those four indicators have not changed significantly over the 40 plus years. We now have a much more comprehensive tool that organizations can use. And so there's a lot of Tree City USAs that I think will add SFI certification to their portfolio. But I also think that we will be able to talk to audiences that we haven't talked to well before, and that there are likely to be organizations that start off with SFI standard and certification, and then find out that they also qualify for Tree Cities of the World, Tree City USA, Tree Campus. And so I think it's going to be a really good thing for both of our organizations. Before I joined, SFI started exploring this opportunity in 2019, 2020, as they were preparing to revise the forest management standard and our other standards. One of the other great things about this is we are committed to updating every 5 years as we move forward. So this isn't a stagnant standard that's not going to get a lot of attention. We are going to be learning lessons as we go through these next 2, 3, 4 years, and we'll be able to apply those as we respond and update the standard as we move forward. Well, as part of that exploration, they put a task group together. You might know some of the people that were on that, Katie Fernholz, uh, Peter Dunker. So there were some real knowledgeable people within urban and community forestry and standards and certification, as SFI has traditionally done it, that led the effort. And they put out this survey, and I thought it was just fascinating. 600 people responded to the survey. 90% of them said, yes, we welcome SFI into urban and community forestry as a sector to develop a standard and the resulting certifications. And those of you that do surveys know getting 90% of anybody to say that the sky is blue is really tough, particularly right now, those of you that are dealing with smoke in areas, the sky may not be blue. I thought even more fascinating, like 1% said no. So that means that 99% said yes or didn't have an opinion. That's pretty strong endorsement to move forward. And so SFI did. They floated the position that I was lucky enough to get and have spent the last 2+ years putting together an amazing team to develop a standard, making sure that it goes through all the necessary processes, that it is a good, legit, sector developed standard. And it has not culminated, but it has resulted in our first approved standard. And now we get to start talking to people like you about how to best use the standard and which of you are interested in certification and helping kind of move that process forward. As I said, I put together an amazing team. I've done a lot of project management. I've done a lot of leadership positions. And the best practice is always keep the group big enough that you have enough people to do the work, but small enough that it's easy to manage. And usually 12 to 15 is the best practice. You count the number of logos on this, you'll see that it's significantly more than 15 people. But that's just how complex and diverse urban and community forestry is. You'll see that the 5 named partners are on there, but you'll also see that we have the Utility Arborist Association, that we have the Urban Wood Network, the Forest Service, both here and in Canada. We had multiple universities, we had multiple communities, lots of conservation groups. It is an extremely diverse group representing a diverse geography, a diverse areas of practice, and diversity itself. Beatra with the U.S. Forest Service often talks about making sure that that class photo looks like you look. And urban and community forestry, well, our towns, our cities are extremely diverse. And so you want to make sure that you have a diverse group building that. And we did some things to increase that even more. If you'd like to know the individuals that were actually representing these organizations, go to our website, forest.org. There is a link to our urban standard page, and you can look at that list there. If I put all the names on the slide, they're too small for people to be able to read them anyway, so it's just best to go take a look there. But it really, it was kind of a dream team. You talk about the 80-20 rule, in this case, 80% at least of this group did 80% of the work. It was an absolute pleasure. And as Sharon Jean-Philippe will tell you, it might have been a little bit bigger lift than we fully understood when we started out 2 years ago. But they powered through and really put together what I think is a great standard for all of us to use. We started off with the standard by talking about why. Why do we need a standard, and what are the principles that we are going to build the standard around? And this is what we came up with. Urban and community forests and trees are vital for community well-being, health, resiliency, and sustainability. Those forests and trees and their associated benefits should be accessible and available to everyone. They depend upon the understanding, awareness, appreciation, stewardship, and engagement of communities and people in order to thrive. They require proper planning, care, management to optimize the benefits and minimize risks. They are nature-based solutions to pressing issues, and they are essential green infrastructure. So really, if you take an organization and you hold up its mission and its vision, everything you do is supposed to work towards that. This standard, every single one of the objectives, performance measures, and indicators is held up to these principles. And I think they did a great job of pointing out a wonderful, comprehensive standard that addresses these principles. So who's the standard for? Everyone. Honestly, we have tried to draw as few artificial lines here as possible. So all types of organizations can use the standard. Government organizations, if your city, if your county, if your state has lands that are urban or community forests, and they are responsible for those forests, they can utilize the standard. Indigenous peoples, non-government organizations. I always think about Up with Trees in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I grew up. They manage significant portions of the urban forest in their operations. Community groups. Can you imagine the first neighborhood association that cares enough about their urban forest that they're willing to say, yes, let's adopt the standard, let's achieve and get recognized through certification that we're doing this? I think there's some great ways that people could use marketing here to really help sell their community utilizing our urban forest. We also have our healthcare facilities, our educational facilities. We had the Cleveland Clinic did a pilot for us. Clemson did a pilot for us. And then also corporate organizations. So right now, there's not really any good way for the Googles and the Apples of the world to say, yes, not only do we support sustainability through our purchasing choices, the things that we do when we travel, but we're also really care about our people, our communities, and we're going to prove it. So what does the standard look like? These are the 16 objectives that we have developed for this standard in lots of review, with many of you being involved. So it starts off with community, people, and Indigenous participation. We then move on to human health and well-being, protection and conservation of biodiversity, stewardship of natural resources, including air, water, and soil, urban and community forest and tree health and vitality, special sites, including natural areas. It's been fascinating through this process to find out how many people don't really think about natural areas as part of the urban forest. And yet, if you talk with the folks in New York City, those natural areas are a vital part of their urban forest. And when you look at things like climate readiness, resiliency, they are a significant part of their carbon strategy. So I thought it was really great that we were able to include natural areas here, as well as other special sites that might be historical, traditional. There's a lot of different ways that you can look at that. And then we move into climate smart management. How do we take care of now and the future? That's the whole part of it being a sustainability standard, is it's got to take a lot of things into account. We then move into the more traditional forest planning. We talk about the management and care. Then we talk about disaster readiness, response, and recovery, because while when we're selling the idea of urban forest, we talk about all of the benefits and the great things that they do, there are those potential downsides. There's always risk, and risk management has to be a part of a good, sustainable, long-term program. We then talk about capacity building. How do you improve year after year? How do you make sure that you have appropriate resources to do the work that you need to do? And how do you find out from others if they think you're doing a good job? Urban wood and community forest utilization. Where's that full cycle of management? Because if you are producing trees, you're eventually producing wood that may have its best use in a large down log on the ground as habitat to help increase biodiversity, or it may turn into the most beautiful table that your organization has ever had. And there's a wide range in between those of ways to utilize that material without sending it and making it part of the waste stream. Here's one that the task group really advocated for, and that's communications as its own objective. Those of you that know me know that I think communications is vitally important, but I think it's a piece of everything. But their point was, if it's a piece of everything, then it's worth pulling out on its own to make sure that it's getting the appropriate recognition and attention that it deserves. Just like our forest management standard, we are really proud to include research, science, and technology in our standard. So the organizations that want to get certified are going to have to utilize, they're going to have to invest in, and that's open to a lot of interpretation. You'll see as you delve into the standard itself, but that is an important part of it. Then 15 is primarily reminding us all that we have laws and regulations that we have to follow. But we also want to make sure that we are paying attention to all people's rights, including our Indigenous people's rights, particularly because this standard will be applicable at least in the US and Canada both. There's a lot of importance here. And then Objective 16 is more about the certification process. That's reporting, making sure that you are telling us at SFI what you need to so that we can maintain the information of your certification over time. This is how it's kind of set up. So we have the objective with a title, Community, People, and Indigenous Participation. Then we describe that objective to strengthen the community, enhance local economies, broaden public engagement, respect diverse perspectives, facilitate Indigenous participation, and ensure equitable access for all to the many benefits of urban and community forests. From there, we have a series of performance measures and indicators for each of those performance measures. In this case, you see there's 3 indicators. Some may have as few as 1, but the performance measure has a description. Organization will broaden public engagement. And then the 3 things that you have to make sure that you're able to show that you do. And keep in mind that these certification bodies are auditors. And so they're going to come in and they're going to audit that program to make sure that your organization has identified opportunities and events for community members to support and celebrate trees. Now, for a lot of you, you're probably already doing a Arbor Day celebration for your Tree City USA or affiliate program. And so that's an easy way to be able to show that you've met this indicator. And we will have time for questions at the end. So I'll dive into the Q&A and all of that after we go through things. Because this is a brand new concept for urban and community forestry, and new for the certification bodies, new for all of the organizations. So not only did we create the standard, which is now approved and set, but we also have a guidance document that is incorporating the language of the objective, so you don't have to have two documents open at the same time, but for almost every, if not every, objective performance measure indicator, there's a box that points out the guidance of how an organization could meet that indicator. One of the things I really like about SFI's approach to standards is it's not overly prescriptive. So knowing that what's done along the Alabama coast is going to be different than what's done in Vancouver, British Columbia, we spend a lot of time of talking about what's locally appropriate when you talk about species, or we talk about the local laws and regulations, so that we're not holding everybody to the exact same based out of DC or Ottawa requirements, but that it is appropriate for your organization in your setting. And so we have quite a bit of guidance that is not normative. That means you don't have to follow it, but it is kind of almost a precursor to a BMP for the SFI Urban and Community Forest Sustainability Standard. In addition, because language is tough, and when you're talking about multiple languages, because being that we are a binational company, everything that we do is at least in English and French. Well, Bo will tell you, because he's one of the reviewers, we're also producing the standard in Spanish. So we'll have at least 3 languages. Not only that, but the language spoke in here in Texas is, even if it's English, often different than that same language that is spoken in Maine or is spoken in Halifax. And so we do have a series of definitions that go along with the standard to help make it clear exactly what we're talking about. We italicize within the standard all of the words that are defined, and that's a lot of italics in that document. So it can make it a little bit more challenging to read, but we want to make sure that you, the user of the standard, know that if you're not quite sure what we mean by urban forestry, that you can go into the definitions and take a look at that. We did put a lot into the development of this standard. So the first draft came out, 2 years ago, just about. We had a public comment period for that where we got hundreds of comments. We went through every single comment and addressed. We didn't change based on every single comment, but we did consider it and make significant changes in both the second draft and the final version. So those of you that participated in either or both of those surveys, I really appreciate it. This was a big lift. Our first draft had 174 indicators. Well, through your efforts and the amazing teams that you'll have heard about, and a couple more that you will see, we've been able to kind of refine that down to 110 total indicators. Don't let that number worry you too much either. Something I'm going to talk about in just a minute can reduce that burden even further for those that maybe don't have as many resources, are more focused on a specific part of urban and community forestry, or just want to be able to get on the bus early and have some early success. We did do pilot projects. Clemson University got a community grant from us. I talked about our community pillar. Well, we do grants each year, and Clemson was one of the first to do an urban community grant. And so they've really been looking at the second draft of the standard. Looking at the second draft of the standard and how they would be able to show that they meet each of those indicators. We also had a great amount of support from the other organizations that you see here that did kind of a desk review of the standard versus their program. It was a total of 17 surveys, one for them to describe their urban forests, and then one for each of the objectives. So hats off to each of those organizations and the individuals that did that. It added a lot of value to what we put together. And then pulling from military planning and software development, we put together a red team. A red team is a group of subject matter experts that were not affiliated with the development of a project, or in this case, the standard, to go in and really try to break it. So Pete Smith and Peter Dunker and Sarah from UBC and Katie Fernholtz were our red team. And let me tell you, I scheduled that for a Friday afternoon because I was ready to have my heart broken. We'd put in a couple of years of effort into this, and I really figured they would find some big holes or something that we had missed. And one of the first comments was, well, on this indicator, you have 8 things listed and you use the word and. Do you really mean that they have to do all 8 of these? Or should it be or maybe and or? At that point, I took a deep breath, relaxed a little bit, because if they were delving into those specifics, I knew that we were in pretty good shape. And they did an amazing, very thorough review and came out with some really good things that we were able to fix before we settled into this final version that is now available. So thank you to them. Thank you to all the pilot. Thank you for all of you that did the public comments, plus the task group. You'll see I say thank you a lot because I just kind of shepherded this program. All of the people that have been mentioned are really the ones that deserve any credit for this. So it is now approved. We are doing the final design for the version that will be on the website. It will be up there soon. But if you're interested, I can give you a copy of the draft guidance document that has the standard and those guidance recommendations. Just give me an email. I'll have my email here at the end. But let's talk about certification, because until we had a standard, we couldn't really take it to that next step. So we have spent the last couple of years, in addition to developing the standard, figuring out how to handle the certification program for this new standard. And I'm really excited to announce to you that we have 2 options available. We have certification to the full standard, so that would be all 16 objectives, 110 indicators, give or take. I will say that if an indicator doesn't apply to your organization, and I'll use natural areas as an example. If you are the corporate sustainability officer for a campus in the middle of a city and you want to get certified and you don't have any natural areas, you don't have to create natural areas in order to meet the standard. There will be times which you have to be able to prove to the auditor that that indicator does not apply to your urban forest. In addition to the full standard certification, making sure that this is accessible was very high on everybody's list of importance. You saw it in the principles themselves. We had some true champions. Elena with Arbor Day Foundation really was one of the most vocal individuals about making sure that this is accessible, because full certification, it is a comprehensive program. There are not going to be thousands of organizations that are ready for full certification next week. We'll get there. But there were talks about maybe a tiered system, and I started thinking about, well, how do you think about points, and how do you say this is more important or equally important to this? And I think we've really settled on a very approachable and important way to do that, and that is thematic certification. So rather than having to meet all 110 indicators, you could just get certified as a community and well-being champion. Or you could get certified for your excellence in environmental stewardship and climate resilience. There will be claims for each of these that you can make, but let's look at these a little bit so that you have an idea of kind of what would be needed for each of these. So first, for community and well-being champion, you only have to meet the objectives for 1, 2, 13, and then 15 and 16 are carried throughout all of those themes. So really focusing in on community, people, Indigenous participation, human health and well-being, and communications in order to get certified as a community and well-being champion. So that's going to be a lighter lift than trying to meet all 16 objectives. Excellence in environmental stewardship, objectives 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the 15 and 16. So you'll see that it is a much more accessible way. And our goal, our hope is that everybody that chooses to start with a theme will maybe want to add another theme in the future or maybe go to the full standard. But if your organization is really focused in on climate resilience, then that may be as far as you ever go. And that's okay, because look at what you're addressing. You're talking about climate smart management, disaster readiness, response and recovery, urban wood and community forest utilization, science, research, and technology. I mean, each one of these has strong import in what we do. And then there's going to be a lot that are really going to be very quickly ready for outstanding urban and community forest management, because you're talking about the planning, the management and care, disaster readiness response, and capacity building. So I hope that you will agree, but I really do think that these 4 options will open up the ability for organizations to be able to utilize the standard and the resulting certifications. So one of the questions I always get asked, and if it's not there already, I'm sure it will be soon, is what does this all cost? And that's one of the challenges, not exactly a challenge, but just one of the facts of third-party certification is that we SFI are not responsible for those auditing costs. Each of these certification bodies that get accredited for the urban standard will set their own cost for doing this. Now, the good news is that many of these organizations have already expressed strong interest in working on this project. And so you are going to be able to talk to several different organizations, and therefore there will be some market forces involved to help keep those costs reasonable. We've expressed to them that this is a brand new concept for many of the organizations in urban and community forestry, and that we've often been a very cost-conscious sector because of a lack of adequate resources. And so they're all keeping that in mind. Other costs, you will have some costs for preparing for the audit. We are working on some programs to try to help with that. We can't, because it's third party, we can't come up with a way to help you pay for that certification and that audit. But we can potentially come up with resources to help you evaluate your program utilizing the standard. And that would be a great way of kind of benchmarking where you're at, knowing which indicators you meet, which potential certifications that you might already qualify for, and then be able to prioritize what activities you'd want to do in the near future in order to be able to earn the certification that is important to you and your organization. There is also an annual licensing fee based on a similar structure to our other standards, but we understand that urban and community forestry is not so much a product-oriented or a sales-oriented endeavor. And so unless you do luckily have an organization and an urban forest that's producing more than $5 million a year in net sales, everybody will come in at that base licensing fee. And so we've tried to keep it very much in line with the other organizations that are already part of SFI. And so we'll be able to share more about that for those of you that are interested. All right. So this is the exciting part. I can't tell you. I'm sure it comes through in my energy and everything, just how excited I am to be at this point with all of you where we have an approved standard. We are in the process of getting these credentialing bodies accredited by ANAB or SEC. And it's now kind of in your court to say, yes, we really like this. We would like to explore what the opportunities are here. So please reach out to me, and we'll delve into a few questions.
Paul, thank you very much. I think, this has really been, fascinating to kind of see the long process, the hard work that y'all put in over the last 2 to 3 years to kind of bring these standards forwards. And it's great to see this in urban forestry. Obviously, I'm familiar with the SFI standards and FSC that came out of, the traditional forest certification, and seeing that kind of translated into urban forest management. I think it's really exciting and creates a lot of new opportunities out there. So thank you very much for taking us through this process and all the hard work that it brought forward. We do have a few questions, and
okay,
as we're asking these questions, just a reminder, please put those questions in the Q&A box. It's just easier for us to track those. Paul, a question I saw here was, are these standards to be used for North America or globally? Have you all thought about, the geographic perspective?
Yes. You'll see that the European Forum on Urban Forestry, represented by Cecil Kanindijk, served on the task group. We are part of PEFC, which is an organization that endorses forest management standards across the globe. And so there is some potential for it to be more than. Our current footprint is really in North America, primarily US and Canada, but we are open to conversations with others. And so if there are representatives from other areas that like this, reach out to me and we can talk to them, particularly if there's not somebody else already serving that area through PEFC, then it would be potentially easy to work with them also, yes.
Thank you, Paul. I did see another question here. Somebody says, how does the Society of American Foresters Urban and Community Forestry certification fit in with this initiative?
I am serving on the task group with SAF working on that credential because that is an individual credential, and what we are doing is a certification for the forest itself and the organization that manages it. They are working within the same space, but not very much overlap, except that one of the requirements within the standard is that you're working with appropriate professionals. Well, ISA certifications are one way to show that. SAF certification, when it becomes available, would be another. And also on the audit team that is actually reviewing your program, currently we're requiring that they have a certified arborist or a board certified master arborist on that team. And we will expand that to include the SAF certified forester when that becomes available.
Thank you, Paul. And I just saw something pop up in the chat that we are going to be sharing the standard. Paul shared it with me, and I was going to email it to everybody on this webinar. I have everybody's email, so probably sometime today, I will send an email with the standards for those of you that would like to see it. It will be shared later today.
Yeah, and what Bo will be sending you is a 2-pager, which includes all 16 of the objectives and their descriptions. It does not include all of the details. You can go to our website, forest.org, and see the second draft. It is available. The final draft, we're in the final steps of putting it out there. But if you are really eager, email me, paul.johnson@forest.org, and I can send you a PDF version of the guidance document, which includes all of the language of the final approved standard also.
Perfect. Yeah, I didn't open that document yet, Paul. So
Yeah, that's just our two-pager to give people a little bit more information because there's only so much you can share of such a comprehensive document within an hour.
sure. Paul, as you anticipated, there was a question related to the costs of obtaining the SFI. Do you all have a feel for what? I know it's third party, so y'all aren't directly, but do you have a feel from maybe from other certifications of what people can anticipate in my cost? I mean, do you have a feel for that?
I can talk about the forest management standard,
Okay.
which is similar in complexity. And depending upon kind of the size and the makeup of that forest is often in the $3,000 to $5,000 range on average, depending upon if you're talking US or Canadian dollars, that affects also. So it shouldn't be more than that. Because we're typically going to be talking about smaller land areas. If you talk about a warehouser or something, they may have many forests that are being audited at the same time. So there's a lot more travel involved. Plus, through the pandemic, they have gotten better at being able to do a lot of things remote, and so there's not necessarily as much face-to-face in the field time needed. And so I would expect it to be within that range or a little bit less.
Okay.
And that's the first year. What I didn't mention is it is a 5-year certification. Our standards are all accredited to the ISO standard. And so there is an annual surveillance audit required each year, but that's a much smaller lift. So the first year of certification would be the bigger expense, and then it would be less in those next 3-4 years. And then when you renew the certification for that 6th year, then there would be another full audit at that point.
Okay. And I think you just pre-answered the next question I was going to ask you, which was, how often you needed to recertify this process and go through that.
We really explored that a lot, but it is because of the ISO standard that it is a 5-year certification with annual surveillance audits in the 4 years after the initial primary audit.
So I'll take it a step further and maybe spin off the question that had been asked. And so y'all have developed these standards now, getting ready to completely launch it. Do you all have a plan in place for maybe reassessing those once they kind of hit the ground, have a feel about what's working, what's not working? Do y'all have a plan in place for circling back and adding, removing, tweaking the process?
The standard is set for the next 5 years. So we all know what we will be working on. In that year 3.5 to year 4, we will start the process of putting together another task group and looking at the revisions and being able to make tweaks. If things have changed and the world were to flip on end and climate wasn't as big an issue anymore, then that might move down. Or if there's another issue that rises as a bigger, more timely issue, it might move up to an objective level. And so, yes, we will be able to revise it on a regular process through time. The traditional forest management standard, I think, is on at least the 5th or 6th. I think we're on the 6th edition of it. And so SFI is committed to maintaining it long term.
Perfect. Let's see, a couple other questions. Somebody was asking about, the task force and, representation from different geographic areas. And they noted that maybe there either wasn't or weren't as many people from maybe the Western areas, so California, Washington, Oregon. I mean, how did y'all look at your geographic distribution to get that feel that you had good representation?
I did everything I could to include all aspects: gender, race, practice area, geography. It's not super obvious from that list of organizations, but Jennifer with the Urban Wood Network is based on the West Coast. Owen Croy is based on the West Coast. So we absolutely did have representation from both sides of the border, from one side of North America to the other.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Paul.
You bet.
We're kind of getting towards the end of the formal questions. Jack, is there anything I missed maybe that went into the chat room that I have not been monitoring as closely? And I can.
You already got the one or two that I was going to point out, so you grabbed them all.
Perfect. We just had one pop in. A couple just pop in. Somebody asked if you would like to pursue certification, would we first approach SFI or an auditing partner?
Come to us first. So we are the part of our plan is that we're celebrating this at ISA's annual conference in mid-August. That's because the board approved it right before our annual conference in BC last month, and we wanted to make sure that we had time to get everything designed, get all the processes worked out. And so there will be a pre-application, a quick, easy survey for you to be able to let us know that you're interested. That's not quite done yet, but absolutely just email me and I'm happy to start that process with you and just kind of talk about any specifics that anybody's interested in.
Perfect. There was another question related to cost and payment. And it says, will municipalities pay once for all forest green areas they manage within the city, or separate for each area they wish to certify?
We are letting the organization define their urban forest. And so if you're only interested in certifying your natural areas, you could do that. If you're only interested in certifying your street trees, you could do that. And that annual licensing fee is for all the above. The only exception to that is for corporations that want to certify multiple areas across potentially the globe. Then there's a fee for each one of those, but everybody else, it's just for the urban forest as you have defined it. And if you get certified for one theme, and in a couple of years you want to add a theme, there is no increase in your annual licensing fee for SFI.
Okay. Well, Paul, thank you very much for sharing this information with us. I think it's been a fantastic presentation. For all of you listening in, just a reminder, this is being recorded. We are going to post this on our Alabama Community Forestry Facebook page. Usually give us a few hours. It takes Zoom a few minutes to generate the link. Jack, my partner in crime, usually posts that when he has a few minutes. And then it's also my understanding, Paul, that I'm going to send you an MP4 and you're going to post this also on your website, because some people have a hard time finding us on Facebook or don't like using social media. Can you tell us a little bit about where you're going to post that?
Absolutely. We have a page on the development process. There's actually several recordings of webinars that have kind of talked about the process and go into each of the objectives in a little bit more detail, all based upon the second draft, not the final draft, but most likely it will be posted there. So if you go to forest.org and navigate to our Urban and Community Forest Sustainability Standard development page, that's where it will likely be posted, and may be posted on our socials also. I can let people know more about that.
Perfect. Well, thank you everybody for joining us on Raising Trees. Just a reminder, as it relates to CEUs, you have to go through that pay portal if you need those CEUs. Jack had posted that in the chat box, so be sure to do that. We do take about a week normally to send those directly to ISA. ISA asks for a few weeks for those to post. So, trying to get these posted within a month, it might take 3 weeks to a month before you're going to see that show up on your records. I get a few emails about that every webinar. So just as a reminder, it does take time. It is not instantaneous. Also on that note, we send your records directly to ISA instead of posting the code and having you submit that. It's the way that ISA has asked us to do that in the case of these webinars. I think the pandemic broke the system with having way too many requests coming at one time. So with that, thank you all very much for a wonderful webinar. Paul, thank you for taking the time to join us on Raising Trees, and maybe we'll have to have you back towards the end of the year to see how it's going for an update. And so it'd be great to follow up on that. So with that, thank you everybody, and have a good rest of your week here at the beginning of summer. Cheers.